If you're new to the classic car market or you've been here a while, you're probably familiar with a gentleman by the name of Carroll Shelby. Cars with his name on the front of the hood sell for ridiculous prices in the American collector car market. And if you're able to find one, it's considered to be a pretty big deal. This car beside me is a 1968 Shelby GT500, and it's pretty incredible. It's unrestored. It does have a really cool history, and it was discovered by one of you, a viewer of this channel. Today, we're going to go under the hood of this backyard barn find. Now, I'd be willing to bet that most of you are familiar with the 1967 Shelby GT500 made famous in the movie Gone in 60 Seconds. However, this is a 1968 and the front end was totally redesigned. For example, on a 67, you had the choice of having inboard lights or you could have outboard light setup. On a 68, the only option was the outboard lights. However, you can tell an early car and a late car by the actual lenses that they use. The early cars like this one got Marshall headlights, which were deemed illegal in some states, and later on switched over to Lucas headlights that most of us are familiar with today. Now, before we move forward, we have to find out exactly where these cars were made. In 1967, Shelbys were built originally at the Shelby American facility in Venice, California. And in 1968, all Shelbys started life at the Ford's Mantuchin plant in New Jersey. Then they were all shipped to A.O. Smith in Ionia, Michigan. Fun fact is that all the 68 Shelby Mustangs were built on the same assembly line as most of the C2 Corvettes. And the reason being is because of the fiberglass. Now, these cars do have a fiberglass front nose, they have a fiberglass hood, fiberglass scoops, fiberglass trunk lid. Now, the fiberglass in 1967 that was built at Shelby wasn't very good, and so the hoods used to bow. Also, the hoods in 67 came the whole way out here to the edge of the grille. In 1968, A.O. Smith developed a brand new hood for this car so that they didn't have those problems. The actual hood was shorter. It's actually 4 inches shorter, and it's the same length as the regular Mustang hood. The reason that A.O. Smith was actually chosen to produce fiberglass pieces for the Shelby Mustang is because they had a brand new technology called reinforced fiberglass plastic. And remember at the beginning of this video when I told you could tell a real Shelby from a fake Shelby, all real Shelby components on the underside of the fiberglass are smooth. So the underside of this hood is smooth, the underside of this front clip is smooth, all the way back here on the scoops. The insides of these scoops are actually smooth. For 68, all of the cars were built between November 1967 and July of 1968. It's the only year for Shelby that you could actually get 3 different variants, meaning you could get the GT350, you could also get the GT500 or the GT500KR. All 3 of these cars are distinguished different in the VIN number for the vehicle. Of course, there's 2 VIN numbers. There's the Shelby VIN number that's over there on the actual apron, and then there's also the VIN number from Ford. Now, if this was a GT350, it would have a J for the 302 V8. This, however, is just the middle version, the GT500, so it has the Police Interceptor, which has the S, same as also the 390. If this was the GT500KR, it would have an R in the middle of this VIN. Now, if we take a look underneath the hood here, it is different depending on what car that you ordered. If you had a GT500KR, those cars had a Ram induction unit, so there would be a Ram air piece that would sit right here underneath the hood. In 1968, a cool fact is that they actually reused the air cleaners from 1967. You can see here on the top of this air cleaner, it has 2 holes that have been filled, and it only has 1 nut for 1 carburetor. That's because in 67, all Shelbys used 2 4-barrel carburetors, and in 1968, they only used 1. Now, if we take a look at the valve covers on this car, we can see that they're in a black finish with a brushed aluminum top, and they're basically different between a 500 and a GT350. So the KRs and the 500s all got the same ones like this. It says Cobra Le Mans. However, if this was a GT350 car, it would just say Cobra and it would say powered by Ford. The reason that these valve covers say Cobra on them is because when Ford took over the Shelby production in 1968, there was no more Cobra cars. They ended up capitalizing on that marketing and would put Cobra on the side of this vehicle, as you can see right here. Now, if we take a look back inside the engine bay, we can see that this car still does retain its original smog equipment, and it is an automatic transmission. Now, a lot of people get confused. The GT500 428 Police Interceptor, and then there's a GT500 KR, which had the Cobra Jet. Basically, they're the same engine. There's really not a whole lot of difference that you can tell with the eye, although there's 30 different differences in total on the inside of the engine and on the outside. Now, this car being a 1968 has several features on the inside of this engine compartment that would not be there for 1967. For example, this hood stop right here and these hood pins on a 67 version is all one piece. Also, this black rubber piece could either be stapled down or it was held down by a screw. Now, in 68, all Shelbys came with this style of rim. It was a black steel wheel underneath with the Garwood wheel cover available on different cars with the Shelby Cobra emblem on the inside. However, most people, when they're restoring a 1968 Shelby, end up putting 10-spoke wheels back on the car. That would be incorrect for 1968 from the factory, but why? These cars were built in 68 as more of a luxurious version. They got a little bit different brakes than 67, and the 10-spoke wheels do not fit around those brake calipers in 1968. I actually get to look at a lot of different Shelby Mustangs through this YouTube channel, and when you go to a car show, you see all of the ones that are nicely painted and restored. I really like, however, that this one is unrestored because of this GT500 logo right here. There's just simply no way that you could replicate that other than Father Time. If we take a look on the inside of this vehicle, we can see that the door tag on a 68 Shelby is actually pretty cool and says Special Performance Vehicle. It also just again mentions that it's a 428 Police Interceptor and that the interior for this car is black. Before we actually get inside though, we can stop here and take a look at the Shelby American door plate here, and that would be only for early cars. Later on in the run, that would switch over to Shelby Automotive. In 1967, the interiors of these cars were pretty much the same as they are in 1968, with the exception of all of the chrome pieces being switched over to simulated wood grain. That's because Shelby wanted to try and make his cars a little bit more luxurious than the prior year before. Also in 68, that's the first year for the center console here, and we do have still the same Stewart Warner gauges involved. This car has 29,345 miles on it. In 68 as well, the seats were pretty much the same, but a little bit different. In 67, they would have one chrome piece here in the middle, and in 1968, you can see that they have two. Also in 67, you would have had a one-piece seat belt, but for safety reasons in 68, they also switched to two. By now, you're probably wondering exactly how this car was missing. Well, the story goes is that the previous owner of this car knew about it since 1975. This car was originally purchased by a doctor out of Luray, Virginia, for his wife as a Sunday driver. If we come to the front of this car, we can actually see that one of the wife's friends sat on the front of the fiberglass here and put a crack down the front side. It's pretty unfortunate. Now, if we come the whole way to the back here, we can see that this car was originally purchased at Coons Ford in Falls Church, Virginia, and it still retains its original dealer sticker. See, it was my thought that this car was never really thrashed around or driven heavy until the other day. I actually have made a video about this car before. It was one of the very first videos I ever made for this YouTube channel, and it's no longer available online. However, there was a viewer who actually saw that video, and his name was Pete Disher. Now, Pete Disher is a guy that runs a website called thecoralsnake.com. And on the Coral Snake, it gives you all of the details for a 1968 Shelby GT500. He had watched that video and saw this rear sticker on the back of the deck lid of this car, and he was able to find out that this car was featured in Superstock Drag Illustrated magazine. A magazine that we actually have with us here today. See, Superstock was basically a magazine that was primarily based on the East Coast. We're on the East Coast right now. This is a 1968 August version, and we can see that it is a drag test issue where they tested the Dodge RT, the Cougar XR7, the Hurst Olds 442, and the Shelby GT500. And they have a 3 or 4 page write-up of this car where they took it to a track called Capitol Raceway, which is only about an hour from the exact spot that we're standing at right now. And they tested this car, and you can see on the side that they have Superstock magazine. They have it here going through tunnels, they have it here going through some streets, and basically just thrashing the car around. But how do we exactly know that the car behind us is the car that's in this magazine? And it's quite obvious the clues are kind of hidden in plain sight. So first of all, the pictures in this car prove to us that the car was either blue, red, or green. And this car checks off blue on that box. Now, the article also says that it was an automatic transmission, and this car does have a C6 automatic transmission. It also states that this car does not have AC. And if we look in the engine compartment here, we see that there is no compressor that goes through the front piece here, and so this car did not have AC. What also was common is that it did have the wheel covers. It also, in the ad, has the Marshall headlights, just like the ones on the front of this car. But what's also really cool is this car does have a front mount antenna instead of the rear mounted one. Now, all of those kind of added up, along with this car, you can see it blasting here, does have the Coons Ford logo on the rear trunk lid. If we add all those up, we can determine that this car is the car from this magazine article, and the head of the SAAC and Pete Disher, the guy who writes for Coral Snake, agree that this is the car in this magazine. So, at the end of the day, we have an unrestored Shelby GT500 that basically has been taken care of, as well as we do have a Superstock drag illustrated test car. Now, if you guys are interested in the Shelby Mustang behind me, this car is for sale, and you're more than welcome to contact us at info@backyardbarnfinds.com.